GoPro, start recording.
Yeah. Not filming.
Yeah. Come on, GoPro, you know better than that.
Such a lame.
Conrad, say it nicely.
Alright. Okay, thank you guys for coming. I didn't expect everyone to join us, but yeah, let's do it. Okay. Okay, so everybody, I want you to write 3 things that you did last weekend, and then you're going to crush it up, and then you are going to get together, and we're going to stand up, you're going to throw it at each other, and then you are going to go and pick one up, and then we are going to walk around and see if you can find who the owner is, and then we are going to sit down and we are going to talk about it. Okay, so were those good instructions?
They were, but I have more questions. That's okay.
Okay, so that is an example of what not to do when giving instructions. So, okay, so you guys don't have to actually write anything. So it's okay. This is so what was wrong? There's many things wrong with what I did. But can everybody tell me one thing that was wrong?
It was just one thing after the other. You didn't give anybody time to confirm or check with you what you actually meant. Or I mean, the fact that I have questions is also indicative of that there were problems. I know I'm blabbering on stuff.
All right. So we have too much at once, right? I said everything right in one basically one long sentence. Anything else?
There wasn't enough detail.
Okay. Okay.
It was all verbal. You could have, show not say.
Okay. Anything else wrong with that?
I mean, as a corollary to that, you could have. For example, you could have said, take a piece, write on it something you did last weekend, and use one piece of paper for each activity.
Okay, yes. All right. And was I looking at you guys the whole time? Or was I kind of moving around looking different directions?
No. It will not.
Yeah, right. I was just kind of moving around, looking here. Everybody do this. But sometimes everybody's guilty of this. They give directions, and as they're like writing on the board, and so they're not really looking at their audience, looking at that people, making sure that they're following along. Is there anything else you guys notice? Okay, so let's go over some of the things that we should consider when we're giving instructions. So the first thing we can do is to plan instructions ahead of time. So if you know that your activity is going to be something a little bit complex, and maybe it requires a lot of instructions, or maybe if it's just a new game that you've never done before, or new activity, then it's good to plan instructions ahead of time so you can know exactly what you're going to say, how you're going to deliver it. So it's good to you can write out exactly what you're going to say. All right, first do this, second do that. So it's helpful, plan ahead. And then one thing is you should arrange the groups and furniture before you give instructions. So if you give instructions that are a little bit detailed and then you have people move and get into groups, then sometimes they can forget the instructions because they're too busy moving around and thinking about their group. So if you have them get into groups and arrange their furniture later, then sometimes it's just too much cognitive load for them. So it's better to just have them get into groups first. Like for example, okay, you say, you two, group, and then you give instructions. So that after you give instructions, they already know who they're working with. just if you guys have any questions or anything to say, just go ahead anytime during the presentation. And the next one is you have to make sure that you have your students' attention before you give instructions. And this is an important one that especially a lot of new teachers make this mistake, and I still do it sometimes. You think everyone's paying attention, but they're not. So what can we do to get everyone's attention?
Look at me.
Okay.
I just watched your video so many times that I remember that chant.
These are called call and responses, and there's so many you can do. There's a lot of interesting ones that you can do. There's 1, 2, 3, look at me, and then people say, the students have to say 1, 2, look at you. And you can do clap twice. Everybody has to clap twice. You can ring a bell. There's so many different ones. You can use like ones related to like a Disney movie, for example. Like there's one that I read, it was Finding Nemo, and you say, shark bait, and then everybody has to say, hoo-ha-ha. So it's like, there's so many different ones you can use, just whatever your class likes. So once you got their attention, you see everyone looking. So when I say look at me, I do this, and I look at their eyes. Okay, we looking. So I know that they're paying attention. Otherwise, one or two students might be just looking around and not get what's going on. Okay, the next one is use a variety of instruction methods, including visuals and extra linguistic devices. So you mentioned this, using visuals. You can have pictures, you can write down the steps on the board, use gestures. That's what it means by extra linguistic. So let's say first you listen, and you have 3 people. So use your gestures and your voice. So for example, you write a sentence, I went to the store, okay? This is what I did. This is my example. Now what did you do? What is your example? Okay, so you don't just copy yours off the board, because some kids like to do that. And also it's good to just practice these things, start to use these gestures a lot so your kids are used to it. It's like they know, stand up. So you can do these gestures even without speaking, they know what it means. Take out your pencil. So once they get used to it, when you're giving instructions, then it becomes much easier, especially with the younger kids. And this one, hand out materials at the appropriate time. So what do you think this means?
Don't give materials out before you finish explaining, because if you do, students will look at what you've given them and pay attention to it and not to you.
Exactly. So I did that wrong. I gave the materials first, and so a lot of times students will just be looking at them, especially if it's like a worksheet that has a lot of things going on. They'll just be looking at it. So you're talking and they're reading it. So what you want to do is you get the worksheet, the material, hold it, chest in your ribs. Okay, we're doing this. Okay, there's number 1, number 2, blah blah blah. After you've given instructions, then you hand it out. Most of the time. There might be some cases where you do need to hand it out so that you can look at it, but it all depends on the case. And that's when it comes into planning. You have to know what will work better. Okay? Another one, speak slowly. Use graded language and make eye contact. So, I think some new teachers make this mistake a lot, is speak very quickly, and even I do it sometimes. And so the students don't understand what you're saying, so they can't get the instructions if you're speaking too quickly. And then also graded language. That means you speak language at their level or below. So don't use language that's too high, and don't use language that's too complex. So, well, first what I'm going to need you to do is to consider it's like, it's too much. Yeah, you use simple, short statements, imperatives. Okay, first, stand up. Then, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then use your gestures, extra linguistic language.
Students, your indolence is implications.
So, exactly, you have to just consider what you're going to say. And this goes into the planning, so if you've done it for a long time, usually I can kind of know the level of my students, but it's still good to plan. Okay, are they going to understand this? What should I use? What words should I use? And then eye contact, so it's always good to just look, see that they're getting it, see that the light bulb is coming on, like, okay. Otherwise, you know, they're not going to get anything, or you can see that they're zoned out. Okay, I see. Okay, so, and then don't get too many instructions at once. This is what we talked about. So if you have a long activity, it's better to break it down. So you do one thing first, and once everybody's finished, get their attention, and then describe the next step. So for this one, it's better to just talk about the first thing you do. Okay, so everybody, you will get 3 pieces of paper and write 3 things you did last weekend. Okay, good. And then so they get started on it, and then you can do what happens next. Okay. Use examples and demonstrations. So if you can write an example sentence on the board, this helps. Or demonstration is an activity. So you use visuals. Like for example, I'm talking about a game. Okay, so teams of 2 people, 1 team. Person A stands here. Person B stands here. Okay. Person A will ask a question. What did you do last weekend? Person B will answer. I went to the supermarket. And then person A throws the ball. Person B catches. And if they catch, they get 1 point. Teacher Jake, will you demonstrate this with me? Okay, I'm person A, he's person B. What did you do last weekend?
I played video games last weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we caught the ball. So our team, we get 1 point. Okay. And now person B will ask me a question.
What did you eat for breakfast yesterday?
I ate cereal. Okay, so now we get 1 point. Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so if we demonstrate it, it becomes easier to see. Okay, and then this one.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I just interject that? When you're talking about, when I was there modeling that exercise with you there, I mean, I understand you're in class and perhaps, okay, I'm teaching in class with teacher Jean, for example, I could model something. How do you feel about, if you know you've got particularly capable students or students in the class, having them model it with you? Because I can think of a few classes I've got where I know one student will understand far ahead of them. For example, let's say BT. I know that Sharon perhaps, or Omar would understand quicker than probably anybody else. How do you feel about, say, having another student model with the teacher?
Absolutely, yeah. That's exactly what I
did.
did.
If you know that they'll understand them, why not?
Exactly, use a strong student to model it. And then sometimes if you don't have a strong student, you model it with yourself. Like I just did, I'm A, but I'm B, so you can do that as well.
Right.
But yeah, if you have a strong student, probably a good way to model it. Okay. And this one is a very important one that sometimes I forget to do. And this is to use instruction checking questions, ICQs. So after you give instructions, you want to ask these short questions that will require them to give a short response that tells you whether they understand or not. So for example, I say, how many people are you going to talk to? So say you gave instructions, you need to talk to 5 people. Okay, so how many people are we talking to? And somebody will answer 5. And are we sitting or are we walking around? So if you do an activity where people have to get up and walk around, you tell them, because sometimes they won't know this, sometimes they'll just sit. It's like, no, we need to stand up and walk around. So we ask the question, how much time do we have? So we give them a time limit. Okay, we're doing 10 minutes. Okay, so we say, oh, 10 minutes. And then these are non-examples, so things not to do. Do you understand? Got it? What are you going to do now? So why are these bad examples? Non-examples.
The first two they're too closed. The students just say, yeah, and then do the wrong, complete the wrong thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. You don't know if they really understand, and a lot of times they're too shy or they're too scared to admit they don't know what the answer is, so they'll just say, yes. So yeah, this tells you nothing, basically. And what about the third one? What are we going to do now?
The third one's the opposite. It's almost too open-ended. And the examples you've got, they're simple, but they're not yes/no questions. So the students are going to give short answers, but they're still going to provide meaningful information. But the second one is just, sorry, the third one for the non-example is just, you can't expect them to regurgitate everything you just said over the past minute or two. Yeah, it's excessive.
Yeah, it's way too open. It's like, especially if the instructions are very long. Yeah, but you can have yes or no answers with some ICQs, but not, do you understand? Because that doesn't tell you anything. Like, for example, are we sitting? And then you say yes or no. Are we walking around? Yes, like that's okay. But yeah, the first two, the non-examples, yeah, they tell you nothing. Okay, and then the last thing you do is, after you set them on the activity, is you want to monitor them during the activity, and you walk around and see how they're doing. And what I like to do is take some notes and see how they're doing. And you know, it could be that they're doing the activity wrong. I can give them some more input, or it could be that they're getting the target language wrong. So depending on what type of activity, you can correct them right on the spot, or you can just report them later, do some error correction later. But when you monitor, you can finally see, all right, did they get it? And if you've done all these other things, they should be able to do it. Well, at least most of them should be getting it. So yeah, there it is. So I'd say these are the main things you need to consider when you're getting instructions. There are, of course, some other little things that you can consider as well, but I'd say these are the main ones. So, any questions or comments?
So are there any certain ways that you tend to use to reward the students that follow your instructions well?
Well, I think immediately if somebody's following my instructions, I give verbal praise, which is a kind of reinforcement. And say, oh, so-and-so is listening, they're following my directions, very good, I like to see that. So for the younger kids especially, they like that verbal reinforcement. Yeah, in general, you have a classroom management system where you reward students for behavior, and you can include that in it.
And on the contrary, how are you going to punish the ones that do not follow your instructions properly?
Well, I tend not to lean too much on punishment. Especially with younger kids, I like to focus more on reinforcing good behavior. But if a student is not following directions well, I have to find out why they're not doing it. Is it because they didn't understand, or is it because they're just choosing to do something different because of a behavioral issue? And if it's a behavioral issue, then I have to do a different kind of intervention with them. But if it's because they didn't understand, then that's something I can do to change, and I can do things in a different way, make it more visual, spend some more time with the student, maybe talk to him a little bit more about it, give him a little bit extra instruction, checking. So, but yeah, it depends on the situation.
Got it?
Nice. Anything else? All right, so thank you for joining me. Yeah, I hope we can have more of these and sort of share our knowledge about other things.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.